Wojnarowski, because we had some breaking news out of Portland this morning. And as usual, it sent some shockwaves through our newsroom today in a development with Damian Lillard and the situation in Portland. And I want to quote you here, Woj, because this stood out to me as the crux of your reporting. You said that his desire for an extension into his advanced NBA years has turned into a battle for the franchise's future. Can you take us inside that battle in Portland?
Yeah, Malika, essentially, Damian Lillard will be eligible for a 2-year, $107 million max extension next summer. Now, that would take him to his 36th birthday under contract in Portland. He wants that extension. He has made it clear to the organization, and there's uncertainty whether the organization will want to commit to him on that, because right now he's a very tradable asset. But all of a sudden, Dame Lillard in his mid-30s, as potentially the highest paid player in the league, $55 million in 2026. Well, that's a very different deal to try to trade. And essentially a new general manager in Portland, whomever would come in to replace Neil O'Shea. You talk to executives around the league, and many of them have one singular question for this Portland ownership group, and that's, do I have the ability to move Dame Lillard if I came into that job? Or are you guys committed ultimately to doing that extension and trying to rebuild another team around him at 31 years old? This is a team that's been in the playoffs 8 straight years. But certainly that kind of a player, as great as Dame Lillard has been and is, you usually see a steep decline. And it is hard in a small market to build a roster around a player at that age with that kind of money committed.
Well, and you mentioned it, Woj, that Portland parted ways with Neil O'Shea last Friday, and that means that the number one priority for their new GM, right, is weighing this extending or trading Lillard. So what's step one look like in that process?
Well, ultimately, this is an ownership decision, and Jody Allen, who took over the team essentially in a trust. She oversees the Blazers as a trust from her late brother, Paul Allen, and it's ultimately going to be her decision on, especially any personal matter of this magnitude. And, she doesn't have the history with Dame Lillard that perhaps her brother did. Paul Allen, who was there when Neil O'Shea drafted him, they've had a great deal of success with him. But I think now as they go out into the marketplace and talk to candidates about rebuilding this Blazers franchise, certainly there's a sense around the league and among those who might be interested in the job that the best asset they have to start a rebuild is Damian Lillard. And, certainly there's some other players in CJ McCollum, Yusuf Nurkic, that if you decided to essentially liquidate this roster, you'd start your rebuild. Could they get enough back in trades for everybody else and then give Dame that max extension next summer? It seems like a harder road to really building a contender. But that's what Dame Lillard wants, and that's what his reps want. And so I think there's a moment of truth coming here in Portland, really next summer in July, when he's eligible for that $107 million 2-year extension. That would certainly put him under contract to his 36th birthday.
Well, and this is fascinating reporting from you on ESPN Plus. You mentioned, and you alluded to it just there, that the teams that are interested in Dame are waiting for him to make an official trade request before calling Portland. Why is that?
Well, that was certainly the case, Malika, in the summer when teams were unclear what his intentions were. It's really a leverage play that you give up some leverage when you make that call. Player hasn't asked out yet. That they know the Blazers lose some leverage once a player asks out. Any team loses some leverage once a player wants out. Philadelphia, I'm told, is really the only team that called with an offer for Damian Lillard. And Portland, under Neil O'Shea, certainly their previous administration, they were not interested in a Ben Simmons trade that would include Damian Lillard. They weren't interested in having that discussion. But we'll see now with Joe Cronin as interim GM and ownership now taking a look at how they want to move forward in Portland. Does that include Dame Lillard re-signed under a long contract next summer? Or do they start to look at him as potentially, a player who has maybe his maximum value in trade much sooner than later?
Yeah, and this is going to be something that we're going to be following and seeing how this plays out. Thank you so much, Woj. Please come back to give us an update on DeMar DeRozan in just a little bit. So I want to bring in the panel for more on this breaking story, Richard Jefferson, Kendrick Perkins, and Zach Lowe. So, Richard, just your initial reaction to this story.
I start to feel bad for Damian Lillard, and mainly for this. He has been one of the most loyal players. He has talked and advocated for players staying, and I would put him in the same boat as Giannis, trying to do it the hard way. Doesn't mean he doesn't have interests other places, but now all of a sudden you get to a spot where you've been Rookie of the Year, you're one of the 75 greatest, your jersey is going to hang in there, and now the team is like, do we really want to pay you a max contract that takes you to 35 or 36? When you look at what LeBron James is doing, when you look at what Chris Paul has done, this man should be, the number one thing should be like, we want you to retire and stay in a Portland Trailblazer jersey. Now, some of that might be like, hey, can we have some flexibility, or is this all about the money? So it's both sides, but I just think for Damian Lillard, it's probably about that time to start looking about where you want to go and what you want to do, because the franchise is looking at you as an asset right now. Just think about that.
So, Perk, do you see Dame with the Blazers long term?
No, I don't. And I think this is a chess move by him wanting this max extension on a way of forcing his way out. Because when I look at this situation, and like RJ just said, look, Dame Dollar is in the same situation that KG was at his point of his career with Minnesota, carrying the franchise, taking them to the playoffs every single year, but not getting and winning the ultimate goal. And right now, Dame has to know that he's not going to win a championship in Portland no time soon. I don't believe that free agents wants to sign in Portland, not the ones that's going to help him win. And I think that him and CJ McCollum has run his course and is not going to get done. And I hate it, because this is Chauncey Billups, first year as a head coach. Him and Damian Lillard are really close, but it comes that point of time in your career where you have to make that business decision of, you know what, my time is up. Let me take my talent elsewhere. Because one thing that I did hear, Malika, in KG Hall of Fame speech, he said this, and it stood out to me. He said, the one thing that I regret throughout my whole career is not getting out of Minnesota a lot earlier and getting to Boston.
Well, I do believe Dame. Dame has been a very transparent player when it comes to his dealings with reporters, right? And he said at the beginning of this season, right? He told it to us on NBA Today. I wanted to get out there and say, I want to be in Portland, right? Because I want to move forward with Chauncey Billups. I want to give him a chance. And when Dame speaks, he has been so transparent that I do believe that that's what he wants in his heart of hearts. But there is also something to weigh here. Zach Lowe, senior writer, host of The Low Post, also joining us. I'm curious, Zach, how realistic is it for the Blazers to keep Dame at this price tag going forward?
I'm not sure, and Richard makes a fair point that, this is an all-time Hall of Fame guy. You should want to have him retire a Portland Trailblazer. You name LeBron and other guys who have aged really well, but I could also name John Wall, Russell Westbrook, other guys whose teams paid them and their contracts became albatrosses. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Dame. I'm a Damian Lillard true believer. Look, the first thing I'm doing if I'm Portland right now is I'm calling Philadelphia, and I'm trying to see, you're hovering around 500. Joel Embiid's playing 1 million minutes every night. What about a CJ McCollum for Ben Simmons? How many picks do I have to add? Do I have to add a young player? Am I going to give you 4 picks and 4 swaps? No. But if we can get to a reasonable point, if I'm the Blazers, I'm making that deal because Ben Simmons is just 25. If I eventually have to blow it up and trade Dame, I have a young cornerstone player that in the meantime fits with Dame. So far, Philly, from what I've been told, has been, if it's not Dame for Simmons, we're not really interested. But that's the first thing I'm doing. I'm calling them. Maybe they're desperate. Maybe there's a CJ McCollum center deal for Simmons that maybe we can start talking about. If that's no, I just don't see a McCollum, Nurkic, whatever deal that changes Portland's life, that changes Dame's life, that makes this team a championship contender. And if you can't find that deal, I think whether it's in 6 months or a year, you eventually have to start looking at what can I get for Damian Lillard in a full restart.
Well, and Woj just said that Philadelphia is sort of the one team that has been in communication on that front. But what's interesting about this reporting from Woj on ESPN Plus is this is a decision that we're not sure whether or not they have an interim GM right now. They have said they're going to conduct a search. So whoever is coming into that GM role, what will they be emboldened to do? Is it going to be to trade Damian Lillard? Is that going to be a Jody Allen decision? Because remember, she invested in all of these extensions coming off their Western Conference Finals appearance, right? And so now those decisions are going to be big ones that they're going to have to weigh, and it's going to fall on this new general manager. But we also have more NBA Today coming up because Miles Bridges is joining